entrepreneurship is like the process to reveal yourself. Whereas when you're in a 9 to 5, like if you have a tough day, it's very easy to point the finger and say, well, this colleague or this manager or this project. When you're working for yourself, you are accountable for your wins. You're also accountable for your losses.
Yeah.
And that's hard to stomach.
We have a special guest, a big inspiration of mine, Zach from We Are Not Marketers, but then also, a consultancy founder, sales background, much like myself. I thought it was a no-brainer to have him on the show. Zach, how are you?
I'm good. We were just talking earlier before this. I took a little power nap before the show. And for anyone who's listening that's managing their own side hustle, their 9 to 5, or building something of themselves, you know how critical rest is. So
yeah,
that was what I was working on.
Yep. Man, okay, so I follow your LinkedIn posts very closely, so I know your story. I know kind of your grind and like how you've got to where you are, and kind of like where you're trying to be and where you're growing to. But the audience does not. So
that's fair. That's fair.
Give them like a little rundown of like your professional background.
Yeah. 10 years ago when I graduated from Wisconsin, I thought I was going to be a school teacher. I'm very passionate about education and the value of it being like, it was a ways to like through life. I grew up from a single parent household in Minnesota, i.e. this is like the childhood home I'm in right now. And there was something like, a lot of our parents told us, it's like, as like, first generation immigrants, is that education is your way to a better life. And being a student, having those mentors made me very passionate about going on the other side. Now, when you go through a 4-year institution as a first generation college graduate, there's student loans. And if you are in the U.S. and you want to be a starting teacher, I'm like, Victor, you laughing about this right now. And you come out with those loans, I'm like, passion can't pay that debt.
Yeah.
It can. But starting off, that was a pretty tough pill to swallow. So I went to study finance. I studied finance, and I was like, I do not want to work in investment banking. Like, this looks psychotic. Nothing against anyone who chooses the profession, but the long hours, like, it just that wasn't for me. The perfect medium I found was sales. And sales is something I stumbled upon. And sales is not something that you aspire to do when you graduate or when you go into school. Not a lot of degrees have a degree. Schools have a degree in sales. But what I really saw was the connection between sales and education was that as an educator, as a tutor, as a teacher, your job is to understand your students, to deliver that instruction, to make it make sense, to connect the dots. That is no different with sales. With selling, it's not pushing a product, it's about understanding the problem. Because we're being sold every single day. We see messages come in our email. We see these advertisements on our TV. But there's always going to be those ones that really cut through the noise.
Yep.
And it's the ones that know who you are and that understand it. So that was the first 5 years of my career. Was at LinkedIn, at an ed tech startup, at a wholesale startup, going through the ranks of sales, talking with different audiences, different industries. And then through that time, I understood, I was like, I really love this. But it was very repetitive for me in a sense. It's like, hey, when you hit a quota, you're like, hey, what can I do? Go do it again. And it's really cool if you're financially motivated. But for me, there was something more. There was something more I wanted to get. And then that's when I stumbled upon product marketing. One thing we're going to talk more about is just kind of like how just like the network I built over the years of my career helped me navigate those career transitions and land those career opportunities. And then in 2020, I made that switch from sales to product marketing. It opened a lot of doors for me. It brought education, it brought sales, into the mindset, because when you're a product marketer, you are an internal salesperson. You are connecting the dots. You're bringing people together to work towards a common goal. The only difference is you're not really on the quota. As a product marketer, many people will argue, like, what is your goal? What is your KPIs? And we're going to talk more about that. So today, like, what I'm doing right now from like hosting a podcast for not marketers to like leading my own like solo consultancy in product marketing, it's a blend of all the skills and experiences I've done today, from like just aspirations of education to like teaching people like what a concept of product marketing, how to think about it, from sales, like selling yourself. Like, as you know, like you're starting this podcast right now, like there's a lot of relationship building. There's a lot of things you think about. It's like, hey, how can I get this across the finish line? So like to be able to see that thread of all those experiences, when 10 years ago I was graduating, I was like, I like sales. We'll see how this goes, to what it's been today. It's been a very fortunate ride.
Yeah. Something like education and sales, you know, like most people would say, like, yeah, there's nothing similar.
Yeah, it is
right?
Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, but it's like there really is, when you really break down what it is that you're doing. So obviously, you know, most people at least, you know, when they hear founder, they think, oh my goodness, this guy's like a rock star, you know, like it's probably like private jets, boom, 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 right? All that stuff, right? But it's like, they don't really know.
It's a commercial. It's just commercial.
They don't really know like what goes into it, like those long nights. But obviously, let me not put words into your mouth. How was like that beginning phase of building out your consultancy?
So there's two things to know beforehand. It was that, one, I started breaking into product marketing like a few years into my product marketing career. It originally started off as a digital course to help others break into product marketing. And then the second thing is that the founder story started from a very hard experience last year. About this time, I got laid off after being in the role for roughly 4 months. It was a shock. It was a surprise. I get the calendar invite 30 minutes before the workday. I remember this day vividly. It was the Thursday, 8:30 a.m. I'm like gearing up, and it's like, oh, I see this invite for 9 o'clock, and I look over to my then girlfriend, and I was just like, wow, I don't have a good feeling about this. That conversation kicked off about 6 weeks of watching Vanderpump Rules, just on TV, on the couch. I got through 10 seasons, 220 episodes, and then after, I don't want to do the math, but I did the math, and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I could write a thesis paper on Vanderpump Rules and the connection of product marketing. That's how proficient I am on this show, like Victor. Yeah. And somewhere along the way, I connected with a friend, and it was Crystal Crouch, and we're talking back and forth. She's like, Zach, you should get into consulting. I was like, Crystal, what are you talking about? And she's like, do these 3 things. She says, go online to inkauthority.com. It's going to cost you about $200. Create an LLC. The second thing, go cross your street and go open up a business bank account. And then the third, just reach out to 5 people a day in your immediate network, saying that you are doing project-based product marketing consulting. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. Because what we both know as, like, when you're a founder, entrepreneur, you build the plane as you fly. Like, a lot of times the people who seem like myself included, especially myself included, that look like they have it put together. Yeah. You're figuring out the problem as you go, and you're just trying to fix, like, what is that next immediate step for me to keep going? And that was what that was for me, was reaching out to those 5 people a day. And fortunate enough, I connected with my first contract opportunity, and it was supposed to be a six month thing. Then I extended another quarter, then another quarter, and it's still a contract I'm working today, along with other short term projects. So like, if you were to tell me like a year ago, like that I would still be working for myself, still be like gainfully employed, navigating this journey, I'd be like, oh, you're crazy.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'm going to say to that is that I know we're going to talk more about this, Victor, but it's like, from the story sounds very pretty, but in between those moments, there was a lot of moments of self-doubt and like instances where I was like, I should apply to a 9-to-5. Like, I can't do this. Like, I'm in over my head too. So I know we're going to talk more about that, but it is a struggle of self when you are starting off as a founder, like building something of your own.
Yeah. And, because like you said, self-doubt, right? And I feel like that's like almost the rite of passage
Yes.
for founders. How did you mitigate that self-doubt, one? And two, how did community help, if at all, if community was a factor inside of that? How did that help your kind of startup journey?
Yeah. It was a combination, including community. So I'll list it off. Is that first, like having a solid morning routine. And people will hear this, they kind of roll their eyes. So, what does that mean? You mean like make your bed or brush your teeth, or you drink the same thing every day?
Yeah.
It really started off with like exercise. Exercise for me, like, it's a space for me to clear my head, because when you have a strong body, you have a strong mind. And like when I'm feeling anxious, sometimes what's helpful for me is to run off that energy. Like, my rationale is that if I'm stressing about something, then I don't have anything else better to do. Then I should go like come to peace with it, help navigate it. And the next is like mindfulness. So when I say mindfulness, is being observant of what's going on in your mind and not reacting to it, because when you're starting something on your own, like you said, there's going to be a lot of moments of self-doubt, like really critical on yourself, hard on yourself. It's learning to just observe it and let it go. So that came in the form of journaling, that came in the form of therapy, and I started doing this like when I was 26. So like by that point, when I started on my own, I had about 4 or 5 years of therapy and journaling under my belt. So it gave me a really solid foundation to help navigate that. And speaking about community too, like especially during the pandemic, it was like just jamming with people on LinkedIn, sharing content on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And like how you and I connected is that sharing content, then hopping in the DMs, chatting it up, or scheduling like coffee chats virtually. Like the ability to just chat with people is that it's not only just to, like, what's the word I'm looking for is that it's not only just to be like, I'm going to build my network. It's about getting a perspective from other people that you may not have gotten otherwise. And from each conversation I came out so energized. I would come out so like fulfilled, and like I felt like I had like a village in my corner that spurred me on, kept me going. And they were there where I needed like advice on like, hey, like, Zach, you should probably try like using ChatGPT for your work. And I'll be like, what? Or like, here's this template on like for your LLC when you're thinking of NDAs. So like that is a combination, is in tandem. It's like there's a lot of self work in terms of like the self care, like exercise, mindfulness, meditation. And meditation doesn't have to be any crazy picture. It could literally be like 5 deep breaths before you walk into like a meeting, or like 5 deep breaths before you start your exercise, or like
making sure you have a ritual.
Exactly. Or just focusing on your breath, like while you're like exercising. So like those were things that were small incremental ways I incorporated that. And it doesn't have to be a heavy lift. Like even when I was mentioned journaling, it was literally if I wrote for like 3 minutes a day, that was it. You skip days too, but find a practice, like you said, find a ritual that works for you and that keeps you grounded and helps you like observe what's happening without reacting to every single thing that comes your way.
Yeah. That idea of like using LinkedIn inside of that way, like you said, like that's how we met. And I forgot like what came first, but there was a point in time where like my LinkedIn was really just full of, hey, I'm so happy to announce, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like it was full of that.
Yeah.
Mostly students, right? And then like a switch hit where I followed my like first like miscellaneous profession. I was just talking about whatever, right? And then that snowballed to like I think Anthony Pieri, and
Yes.
like his content, right? And then falling in love with that, and then wouldn't you know it, all of a sudden we are marketers had him on a show, and I'm looking at that content, I'm like, okay, cool, cool, whatever, right? And then Zach, one of the guys on We Are Marketers, says this about product marketing, and it's just this snowball of all these professionals talking about different things, right? And it's like that
Yeah.
you really do stand on the shoulders of all these people that you like slowly look up to and stuff.
Yeah.
And it builds you out as a person, as a founder. I remember like reading your post about like the early stages of like why you built breaking into product marketing, and like getting that like that's just like me, right, kind of moment, right? Like that's
Yeah.
powerful. You need to have that type of person, those type of people that you can say like, oh my goodness, like that's just like me, right? Because if your entire feed is just full of like, and I started with zero and got to $600,000 in 3 months. You know what I mean? Then it's like, oh, okay, I'm doing something terribly wrong, right? But like getting those grassroots people, it kind of like brings you back down to earth and helps you like
Yeah.
breathe a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's a really powerful point. And when you say that, I think a lot about like autobiographies that we read. Like this past year, it was like John Lewis and Nelson Mandela, and those are very powerful reads where it's not only their achievements, but they tell it in a way that you can relate to. They share struggles that they went through that necessarily like we haven't gone through like to the T, but like the feelings and emotions that they endured through that really brings us closer to them. And it's another Stoic teaching that they talk about too, is that like if your ancestors have gone through it, like you can make it too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's well. I think what you're highlighting about LinkedIn is because that makes it easier. It makes it
Yeah.
easier to get there when you can relate to the people you're jamming with.
Yeah. Because of the internet and the access we have to other people's personal lives, quote unquote,
Yeah,
people sometimes get that like imposter syndrome, or they feel like they're not knowledgeable enough inside of a field, or they're afraid to start. Um, like for you, especially like since you've become a voice of product marketing, with like We Are Not Marketers, um, when you were teaming up with your co-hosts, did you have that feeling of like man, am I really the most qualified to be talking about this and so on? And how did you kind of wrestle through that?
yeah, it's a great question. Um, when I think about imposter syndrome, is that I take it as a signal as that you are seeking to grow out of your comfort zone. Like when you are feeling that sense of like, why am I in this space, or do I even belong here? That can actually be a very good thing,
Mm-hmm.
because that means that you are pushing yourself and you are showing yourself that you deserve that growth, or you deserve that love, you deserve that like that intention. But there it's just that gap of like what your gut knows what you need, but then your mind is kind of like, we ain't ready here. Like we aren't
Yeah.
ready to be here. So like when we started off the podcast, like behind the scenes, we were really like surprised by like the response we got when we first launched. Because if taking you back, that was about in November, around November, October of last year, where we posted, hey, like our co-host Gab posted, product marketers aren't marketers. and kind of share the point of view. And then
Mm-hmm.
it felt like we kicked the hornet's nest of LinkedIn. And people were coming out. They're like, yeah, that is so true. And other people were like, one person in particular wrote, it's like, the idea of product marketers not being good marketers is the worst idea to ever get traction on LinkedIn. And we're like, correction, we didn't say not being good marketers. We said we're not marketers. But so one thing is that, like, with the age of the internet, is that with how quick we can get feedback and the gratification we see when things are good, is on the other end of the scale, we can see things that make us feel really bad. Yeah. And when people don't agree or people might criticize an idea, we feel that attachment to that idea where it's just like, you're attacking an idea, you are attacking me. So like one thing is like, don't take it personally. Take it with a grain of salt. Have fun with it. Like, have a conversation. And I think that was the mindset we started approaching all the time. It's that, like, we're saying this point of view, but we're saying it with the intention of sparking a conversation.
Yeah.
We're not coming in to say that you're wrong, but if you have a difference in opinion, we love to understand that. And I think that's another thing that has changed with the internet lately, is that a point of view is a breeding ground for an argument. And how we see arguments is like, it's you versus me.
Yeah.
But if we can shift our thinking around, this argument is just really a differences in expectations. And the focus is just you and I working together as understanding what those, you are seeing, what are we seeing, I'm seeing. We can maybe come to an understanding, or maybe we don't come to understanding. But in the end, like, both parties come smarter if you come in with a true intention of just learning from each other's perspective.
Yeah.
And just like accepting like, hey, there's some points, I mean, we may not be right, but like for the sole attention of the show, the point of view is to start a conversation.
Yeah. Exactly.
And as you see, it's working. And like kind of what your show too is, you're to start a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that like even like with so many years of entrepreneurship under my, well, I say so many years, it's not that many. Even with like a few years, man. It's experience. You know, I appreciate that. Even with like the years of experience under my belt, confrontation, and like I put that in quotations, confrontation is still something that like I still grapple with, right? Of like that fine balance between like, oh, you know, like I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a founder, so like I do need to be stubborn in many like areas and stuff, and I need to, like you said, like some people, they'll make comments and like, yeah, sure, it's a conversation, but like sometimes it'll just like not be helpful, so it's like you need to be able to stand your ground on some things, right? But I really appreciate you guys at We're Not Marketers, because it's even like forced me to be able to have conversations about like topics in general, and disagree in a healthy manner online. I'm pretty good at doing it like in person because I can see the person or whatever, right? But like these like parasocial conversations are sometimes a little bit harder and stuff. I remember I was like somewhat debating you on one of your posts where you were like saying like, yeah, you know, product marketers aren't necessarily marketers because this and I took that leap where I finally like got in the comments of like, okay, but like, you know, is this whatever, right? And it was like pushing myself of like you answering back, like it's not like, oh my goodness, I need to shut up, right? But it's like, no, like this is good, this is a conversation, right?
Exactly.
So like for people who maybe like as founders and you know they're building themselves up and maybe they feel like they don't have like the stomach for disagreement, right? Like how would you say they build up those muscles in order to be able to have those conversations and be comfortable with disagreement?
Yeah, that's a great question. First thing is, always assume best intent. It's a lot easier to go into a conversation with a different point of view when you are going in there, you are assuming this person I'm talking to has good intent, and I'm coming here with good intentions too as well. And the intentions is like, I just want to understand. Like, I'm pushing you to give me a different perspective for me to understand. I'll give you a quick story. It's that so Socrates back in the day, and when you think of Socrates, he's one that later on they named the Socratic questioning after. And when Socrates would ever come to a room, and he was, and mind you, this guy was the instructor. You go into his classroom and you ask him, you're like, hey, what is the meaning of this reading? And he's like, oh, that's a great question. Like, what do you think is the meaning of this reading? And you're like, I'm here to you're the teacher. Why are you asking me this point of view? So that was one thing. The other thing he would do is that he would debate one side of an argument, and then he would switch to the other side of the argument, and with the same passion, argue the opposite point of view.
Yeah.
Now, so what does this mean? It means that ideas are not personal to us. Ideas are ideas. And when you are going into a conversation where it's like, hey, I have a different point of view, you have an experience that that person might not have, and vice versa for that person that has that too. It's not to say that that person is wrong or you're wrong too, but from your point of view, you guys are experiences give you a unique insight that where that disagreement's happening, and that's okay. And so when that example you brought up where you're like, where I'm saying product marketers aren't marketers, because in the sense of how marketing is performed today, I'm just like, no, it's not. But when you came and said, well, you're marketing, I was like, well, I can see where you're coming from. Like on paper, if no one doesn't know what a product marketer does, I say I'm a marketer. I will say I'm a marketer because it's a lot easier explaining I'm a marketer versus I'm a product marketer. Yeah. Because we all know product marketers struggle to position themselves. Yeah. But in the end, just to wrap it up, is that, hey, ideas are ideas. They're not connected to you. There will be some people who will be offended when you don't agree with them. But like I said, if you come in there with the good intentions, that's a them problem. That's not on you.
Mm-hmm. That's real. That's real. That's the quotation of the episode. That's their problem.
Exactly.
So I'd like to know about some of the challenges that you've faced, whether it's starting up the podcast and the consultancy, or maybe even how entrepreneurship and you being an entrepreneur and kind of working on to some extent your own schedule and stuff. How has the world of entrepreneurship and being a founder affected your personal life and how you've been able to live your life as a human?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that I'm actively working through right now. And I will give you a quote that we had from a previous conversation we had with Emma Stratton from this last season. And we were having this similar conversation. We were talking about entrepreneurship. And we're like, Emma, as someone who's been doing this for 6-7 years now, what are you taking away from this? And she looked at us in the call and she responded. She was like, well, entrepreneurship is the process to reveal yourself. Whereas when you're in a 9-to-5, if you have a tough day, it's very easy to point the finger. So this colleague or this manager or this project. When you're working for yourself, you are accountable for your wins. You're also accountable for your losses. Yeah. And that's hard to stomach. And those highs can feel high and those lows can feel low. And it's really learning how to navigate those feelings and knowing where you're good at and where you're not so good at, and learning how to be at peace. So I think for me, knowing that I'm a perfectionist. I'm gonna tell you I'm recovering, but deep down, Victor, I want to make sure things are right. So the first thing I had to unlearn was that, hey, it's okay to ship good enough. Knowing that you're going to iterate on it, knowing that you're going to build off of it. The second thing that I had to understand too as well was that the power of rest. Like there was moments where I'm just like working, 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 working. The work will never stop as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So it's knowing how to take that conscious break, knowing how to say no to things. Like when you are starting something and you're like, I'm so focused on hitting these targets, you might be willing to say yes to everything. But when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else.
Yeah.
So knowing that there is power in saying no, setting that boundary, you are going to be expending a lot of energy. And that might mean like less time with like friends. That might mean like saying no to other parties. I'm not saying that, oh, don't ever see your family ever again. That's not what I'm saying at all or advocating. But it's just knowing how to communicate. Like where I would talk with my family, I'd be like, hey, like I gotta work on this. Like I'm gonna sit down with you guys here. After this, I gotta go do this right now. And just being very fortunate where people are very understanding, your loved ones are very understanding of what you're working on, because there might be some people who won't get that when you are putting in that energy and that time, it's like, well, why are you not putting that energy towards me? And that's hard, and I don't have a good answer for that too, because it really depends on the context of the relationship. But like, you got to really like know what your priorities are, and it's like, is this something that brings you joy? Is this something that lights you up? Is this something that allows you to bring your full self in what you're doing? Then if that's what it is, then keep going towards it, and it will work itself out.
Yep. Nice. Yeah, I think that the rest thing is definitely interesting. Like for me, I'm doing pretty much 2 podcasts at juggling those. Yeah, like working on the editing and the clips and the whatever, right? Yeah, rest has been a very difficult thing because I'm so used to resting when I burn out, right?
Yes. Yes.
And like for yourself, like how did you figure out like the rhythm that like works best for you?
I'm traditionally a morning person. So like I'm up at like 5:30, 5 a.m. Like people laugh about that at lines. So, oh, you don't have to get up at like 5 a.m. 5:30. I'm like, yes, you do. I will put it like, because like I'm telling you rest, but like my intentional trade-off is I'm willing to get up earlier. Mm-hmm. Like, so like I get an early start today. I can exercise. I can do my things to ease into it. So like in terms of that, like just going on walks, trying to not look at your phone, like that's still a bad habit. Like I'm still trying to work. It's that because when you're looking at your phone, your mind is still active, not trying to watch TV. Like find ways to take intentional moments, like journaling, like brain dumping ideas on paper, like ways, because when you can take your mind off of work, that's when ideas start to happen. Like when you're talking about your podcast, some days when I'm like just like, like brushing my teeth or just like, doing some chores, and I'm like, oh shoot, I got this idea for this. I'm like, oh, I got this meme that we should post online just to like start get people talk. And then you start connecting these dots. So, like really like when you are taking rest, like also ask yourself like the give and get. Like if you're gonna take an hour-long break, that's fine, but like what are you gonna do afterwards? Mm-hmm. What are you committing to? Because rest is just as equal as commitment. If not, rest might be more because you gotta recharge batteries.
Yeah. I feel like people such as myself get so like driven, and they put like all their life energy into like this like baby theirs, right? And they don't really put anything back, so it's very easy to just like get to points where it's like you're just exhausted and it's just a matter of pacing yourself, right?
Yes.
And I'm definitely still not there yet. think big picture, so then I try to work on the big picture, right? Rather than
Yeah.
breaking them up, and it's like, okay, like little by little, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and it's okay. Like another thing I've learned too, that when you like the email can wait till tomorrow.
Mm.
Like not every single email. Like there's some guys that or gals that I send a message to and they get back to me within like an hour. I'm like, dang, like how are they doing that? Like I emailed other day. I emailed Dave Gerhardt because I was like making an intro for another guest we had on Emma Stratton to their podcast. And then I sent Dave an email, and then like within like 2 hours, response back, one word, absolutely. And I was like, damn, like he's cool. But it's like those two things. It was like, wow, the fact that he got to me so fast. Yeah. But then he just wrote absolutely, period. Like for me, like if ever I got an email, I'd be like, if Dave were to send me an email, I'd be like, well, Dave, so great to hear from you. Absolutely. Hell, like let me know how else I could be of help. Yeah. Talk to you soon. Can't wait to see you at Drive. And then it's like, but he just like one word, absolutely. So I was like, wow, okay, yeah. I was like, all right, okay. I'm like, this is executive energy here, I guess. Like,
yeah. In like your career so far, like what was the most significant failure of yours? And what did you learn from it? How, like in hindsight, have you seen that it kind of like formed you into the type of professional you are now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Like my most significant failure. In the moment, it felt like a failure. Mm. But looking at it now, I wasn't. I was in a workplace that I wasn't being treated fairly. And I took an intentional step of walking away from it without giving a 2-week notice. I gave them a 2-day notice. And here was the reason, is that when I first started this role, I loved this job. Like, I loved the work that I was doing. I loved the people I was connecting with. I loved the project I was working on. And then over time, it's like, things started to devolve where I was getting left off of like a meeting. I got left off a meeting one time and I reached out to the then manager. I was like, hey, what's going on? Is there something like I did, or is there a way I'm coming off? Mind you, I was one of 2 black people on this whole marketing team. So like that's something I always sat in the back of my head, is that like, how is my presence coming off as a black man in tech? Like, how am I being received, especially a black man in marketing within tech, where it predominantly leans to white women, white cis women. Let's call it for what it is. So I was just like being mindful. I was like, hey, how is my energy coming off? Like, is there something? Oh no, we just moved so fast. It's just like that's just it happened. It was an accident, and then several months later, I get like a underperforming performance review, and when I just remembered, that was such a shock to me. And I sat there. I was like, is there something that I did wrong? Like, was it? I said, oh, we got all this feedback from other people. That, like. You did this, you did that, and I was just like, well, how come this wasn't brought to my attention? I have all these individuals saying these things here, so I'm so confused. Can you help me better understand what's going on? And as I came to it, is that like what this feedback said is not a reflection of who I am. This is not the case. This is not who I am. Like, I will hear you out. I will work on it, but like sometimes I learned is like some feedback, like depending on what it is, you can't let it get to you. There's helpful feedback that's gonna help you build you up, and there's in reality in corporate spaces, there's gonna be some feedback that will not help. It like hurts. And it got to a space, Victor, where like I would go to bed and it just felt like a weight on my chest. And then like I would wake up in the morning, then I'll look over to my desk in the top corner, in the corner of my room, and that's where I worked. And I just felt my heart rate like pick up just looking at this desk, because it was such a source of contention and anxiety. And I remember interviewing through experiences. I was interviewing to just get out of this job, get out of this job. And when there was one interview, I made it to a final round and I just broke down. And then I told myself, I told my family, I was just like, hey, like, if I'm still feeling this way by the end of this weekend, I'm putting in my notice. And I called the manager up, and I was just like, hey, it's either my health or this job, and I'm choosing my health. And it was a pretty short call after that. She was, okay, well, you know what, do this, do that. Also, make sure you send in a resignation letter. I wasn't going to send a resignation letter, Victor, but when she told me that, your boy wrote a resignation letter. I'm like, I pulled out that intro business law course from 2015, my boy, and I just laid it out. I was like, here are the facts. Here's what's happened. This is why I'm leaving.
Yeah.
And 2 days later, I left, and that was the first time I left a job without another job in hand, and it was the most freeing experience. I rollerbladed along Embarcadero in San Francisco every day. I watched TV. I occasionally interviewed, and fortunate enough, I found another job a month later. And then 4 months later, I got laid off from that job. And that's what kicks off. That's what kicks off being my founder's journey. So, things happen, and it's just like it's how we respond to it too.
Yeah.
Don't ever be afraid to walk from a space if it's just hurting your soul.
Yeah.
It'll work itself out.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely something that I struggle with at times, where it's like you try very hard to fix bad things that are going on in your life, because obviously, like, what human enjoys bad things, right?
Yes.
So, like, you spend so much time like, oh my goodness, okay, like, this slump that I'm in, like, if I can only just like get out of it like as soon as possible, boom, get whatever job, or like just power through like this job, or it's like, oh, I don't have anything like lined up, so I guess I'll just like stay until like whatever, right? I feel like when we try to like fix it, we don't let life just kind of like flow. And we don't let I think that's the best way of saying it. Like, we don't let our life flow. And we don't, because we can't see into the future, obviously, and like as things happen, we're able to see, okay, well, where is this leading me to, right? Like, at that time, you didn't know that it was going to lead into another job in like 1 month, right? So like something was like gonna be there later, right? You didn't know that. And then on top of that, you didn't know that like that job that maybe you were like all happy, like, oh my goodness, finally, got a job after a month. 4 months later, you'd be, whatever, right? But like, you didn't necessarily fight the flow, or at least maybe it hides, maybe you did.
I was fighting some tears.
That's what I'm saying. In this overarching story, like, it's something that like is almost like a trophy, and it's like, yeah, like this was my journey, and this is everything that I fought through, and here I am now, right? So I think, like you said, it's taking those deep breaths, and it's like, okay, like, the world isn't ending, like, let me make sure, like, I think your story is a testament to this idea of like, the world's not ending, so take a deep breath, right? Your mental health, like, if you don't like take care of that, the world will end. Your world will end.
Oh,
Definitely
yeah.
will.
Oh yeah.
Right. But a company laying you off, your coworkers treating you any which way, layoffs, so on. The world is not ending as long as like you are able to like keep caring for yourself and keep like taking care of yourself, like that saying,
Yeah.
take care of your body and it'll take care of you, right?
Exactly. And like you said, Victor, it's like one thing that when I feel overwhelmed, there's one question I always ask myself. I'm like, what is the first step I can take? What is the next immediate step I can take right now? And like what you're saying, don't look at 6 months. Just look at what is that next step in being at peace with it.
Yep.
And that's something I always keep in mind.
Yeah. Honestly, like you are, I've said this many times already, but like a big inspiration, like even to me. Like I read your stuff, and I'm like, if I was there, like I really don't know like how I'd go about it, right? But this level of like you're not afraid to be vulnerable even inside of like those moments, and like, you're very attuned to your mind. Like when you talk about like that one interview that you had with whichever company, where like even in the like interview process, like you could kind of get like
are you talking about the recruiter that was
yes
coming at me sideways about
yeah.
like, oh, you consult, yeah
even,
you're like,
even in that, being able to be like, you know what, I remove myself from
yes.
you guys' interview, like that is big. A lot of people, it's like, I need a job, I gotta stay, you know, I gotta whatever, right? That's a different level of like self-love almost, I'd say. How much of, I mean, I said self-love, but whether like you agree with it or not, like would you say one, that's been a very important aspect of your entire like founder career and founder like yep, founder career was a good one. And then two, how does someone develop that?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, as someone like, if for anyone here who deals with perfectionism, or as a type A person, the feeling you always that sits in your corner is crippling self-doubt. Is that, and I think that's one reason why like a lot of like perfectionists, I'm not going to attribute for this one reason, but like why anxiety might be a good thing for people who perform very well is because in our mind we're working against the worst possible outcome.
Yeah,
we are working, like with that example is that I need to bust my ass right now, because if I don't do it, I'm gonna get a paycheck. And in moments like that's very helpful, but in where it starts to hurt is when you start getting super critical of yourself, very critical of beating yourself down. So to really balance that out, it's like, yes, that's self-love. And then how did I get to that place? It was one, like I said, it was therapy. It was, how do I rewrite the negative script in my head? And one area is failure. Like, how can you rewrite failure in your head to be a source of strength and inspiration? In this book, in the book called The Confident Mind, the author, like I apologize for the author's name, is like he breaks down failure in like 4 different ways. He says whenever a mistake happens, you got to remind yourself is that one, it's a one-off. Like it happened one time. Because it happened once, it doesn't mean it's going to happen again. And that's 2, it's independent. The mistake is independent of the one before. It's like, you are not a mistake, you made a mistake. When you say that, it's different. And it's 3 is that, like, it's not personal to you. Like, that when this happens, like, it's not personal. Like I said before, is that the traits that you bring in are not preconditioned for you to fail. They were, like, you can choose how you can make that happen. And then just the fourth one too is that you can always walk away. You can always brush it off.
Yeah.
You can always brush off that feeling. Like, when it happens, it's just, it is what it is. It happened. And so recognizing that gave me more space to say that, like, I am a good person. And if it doesn't work out, great. If it does work out, great, because the failure and success is not personal to who I am.
Yeah.
And I'm going to keep on showing up for myself. I'm good. I know what I need in order to bring my best self. Like the example you brought, Victor, is that if I went into that recruiting, that role, and I got that job, great, I got a paycheck, but I would have been so unhappy.
Yeah.
I would have been lesser of myself, and is that the person that my family deserves? Is that the person that like my loved ones deserve? No. So that's, the last point is like when you think of self-love, you gotta ask yourself, who's the person that your 6-year-old self deserves right now?
Yep.
Yeah. And when you can ask yourself that question and just reflect on it, then you're gonna start to uncover what self-love you need in that moment to show up.
Yep. Just wrapping up, I guess. What advice are you giving to I'm not even gonna say like the next generation of founders, but just founders in general, of all experiences, walks of life, so on. Like, what is something that founders need to keep in mind or maybe work on as they aspire for greatness inside of their endeavors?
Selective attention. Learn it. And this is why. When you're starting something on your own, it's very easy to go on LinkedIn and see other people who are killing it. It's very easy, like what we were saying earlier in our conversation, where you see that person that has from 0 to 600K to 3 months. It's very easy to go in your email and see like, oh, I almost made this mistake as a founder, and it was a $300 million mistake that I avoided. And you're like, oh damn, I wish I had $300 million, or I wish I had 300K in my account,
Yeah.
And it's having the ability to observe and celebrate one person's success and not take it personal, and also remember that behind that email, behind that post, that someone is fighting their own struggle. Social media success, it's a snapshot of life. It's not life's entire story. So when you are focusing on yourself, when you are working on yourself, you're working on your endeavor, and you see the host Victor post is like, yo, I just closed my first sponsor, and you're like, I'm just trying to connect my headset mic to my laptop, and Victor's out here closing sponsors left and right. Is that this similar struggle that you're going through right now, this is what Victor had to go through to get there.
Yep.
And that's where like you can take that attention away from that envy and put it towards aspiration. That's where you can put it towards like work ethic, discipline, fortitude, resilience. So selective attention is not only just tuning out what people are saying online, but tuning in to the experiences that can keep you going. So that would be my advice, is just like honing in on that selective attention, knowing where to put your attention on and what energizes you and brings you joy to keep going forward.
Awesome. Oh, couldn't have said it better myself. I appreciate you, Zach, for coming out onto the podcast. And I appreciate you sharing your life and your journey on the internet. It's a huge help, and it's definitely like gives clarity through all of the other social media noise, and kind of gives you a look into like a real human's life, and them still being successful without all the flashing lights and the fluff and stuff. So I really appreciate you.
I appreciate it. Likewise, Victor. Thank you again for having me on the show, and I'm very grateful to have shared the space with you too, and looking forward to what each of us accomplish here next.
Yes, sir. And obviously, I didn't forget about you guys. You can find more of Zach speaking into a mic on his podcast with a few other co-hosts. We Are Not Marketers. That's a fantastic show. I've never seen so many skeletons inside of my life. And they're a fantastic group, man. Super engaging guys. So you can find more of that. I'll link it, somewhere. And obviously, Zach, thank you so much for coming out.
Hey, Victor, thank you for having me.